Hello, everybody, and thank you, first of all, for being here at this time of the day. I'll introduce myself in a moment, but what I would like to say is just thank you to Ufi and the team for an amazing event, as always, and thank you for inviting us to be here on the stage as well. So, my name is Ulpa. I'm clearly not the person in the picture at the top there. Tiffany would have loved to have been here, but unfortunately she is not well, so I have taken over. So I'm Ulpa Chauhan, and I'm B2B Director at Beyond Bamboo. On the stage here I have with me Abby, Payal, and Ishan, but I will let them introduce themselves because they will tell their story much better than I do. So a little bit about us at Beyond Bamboo. We're one of the leading sustainable procurement companies serving hospitality sector in the world. And we work in a way that's very, very different. It's very much a passion project for many of us in the company with what we do. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of story about the name Beyond Bamboo and where it came from. Because it was started by Tiffany Kelly. She's one of our co-founders. And she was sitting in the garden with the other co-founder, Jackie, and there were some bamboo chimes in the background. And she was like, oh, you know what, I'm really fed up of this Amazon packaging, that's coming through my door, either wrapped in plastic or it's in a small item in a big box, and then, it's such a waste, let's do something. And that's where they came up with the name Beyond Bamboo, because these bamboo chimes were going in the background. But actually they realized, you know what, there is so many more materials out there that also are really sustainable and are just as amazing as bamboo is. And so Beyond Bamboo really signifies what we're all about, which is going beyond sustainability. Because to sustain means to do no more harm. But where we want to take everybody is on a journey to where we go beyond sustainability to rejuvenate and regenerate the planet, to leave it, as Mark said there, in a better place for the next generation. So that's a little bit about us at Beyond Bamboo. I'm now going to put my other hat on, which is the Global Youth Awards, as Mark mentioned there. And the Global Youth Awards were also started by Tiffany back in 2012. We celebrated 10 years last year of celebrating young people. And what we provide is a global platform for young people to showcase their projects that they do in 3 areas: environmental rejuvenation, educational innovation, and empowering everyone. And Beyond Bamboo we sponsor the environmental category for the Global Youth Awards. And as I said on stage here, I've got our winners and contributors to the Global Youth Awards, so I will let them introduce themselves.
All right, well, hey folks, lovely to see you all. So my name is Abby. I'm definitely slightly out of my comfort zone because normally I'm surrounded by trees and birds and nature and solo in my tent. But occasionally I do stride out into a hotel, and I'm hoping today to bring some earth back to the conversation today and everything we're discussing, like right back to the roots. All the puns are completely intended and unscripted. So about myself, so I'm a filmmaker, kind of fit in the adventurer bracket, and basically I run an organization called Spend More Time in the Wild. I need to say no more, really. It's all about getting people outside for the benefits of mental and physical health, and I think we'll have a chance to talk a little bit later about where all of that began. But my work is most well known for YouTube. I try and keep everything as free as possible. I've got nearly 10 million followers on there now. Basically, I go out and I document my journeys around the world. Most of them are solo, where I share my own stories with mental health and chronic pain, and try and just use myself as a little bit of a guinea pig of inspiration to encourage people in their own personal journeys to get up and out and spend more time in the wild.
My name is Payal. I am basically the youth representative for B2B. I've been working for them for 2 years now. I guess my official title is procurement sourcing lead, but I do a lot of other things. I'm also a university student as well, so I work at B2B part-time.
Hi everyone, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Ishan Shah. I'm 19 years old. I'm also a student at King's College London, so it's great to see the business school here. I'm studying international relations. But I'm the co-founder of Soul and Dreams and the Youth of Freedom Collective, which are 2 international youth-led collectives working against modern slavery and human trafficking. and also advising different UN agencies and member states on human rights, gender, and youth matters.
Lovely, thank you everyone. So welcome to the future, as I like to put it. So I have some questions that I've got for these amazing people here. So I'll come to you first, Abby. Abby, tell us more about what you do and why you are driven by it.
So we'll pause the future and head back in time for a wee moment. So my journey began in sort of the environmental arena. As a kid growing up, I went to 6 different schools and I was very severely bullied. Home life wasn't particularly safe or stable, and what I ended up doing was really turning to nature. Nature became my safe place. And I remember one Christmas I managed to somehow get hold of a little Sony Handycam and filmed my local wildlife, and the wildlife became my friends, it became my family, my place of exploration and growth. And as I sort of got older, I came to terms with the fact that I was struggling with severe mental health conditions. I tried to end my life 6 times by the time I'd reached college, and college was the first place that I actually found a sense of belonging in terms of this educational scene, and they sort of helped support me through the creation of films. So when I was at college doing archaeology, geography, environmental science, all the stuff that really sort of floated my boat, I used some of their camera equipment to start to talk about different environmental issues. And the things that started to come up for me were things like the unsustainable production of palm oil, marine debris, because it's very local to me down on the southwest coast, and various other environmental issues. And I started to turn the camera on myself as opposed to just the wildlife. I mean, wildlife looks much better, but it can't talk too much. And off the back of that, I ended up winning a few sort of youth competitions. I got to sort of meet David Attenborough, who was sort of the awardee of one of these competitions. I got to speak in the European Parliament about the unsustainable production of palm oil, and we sort of moved forwards with discussions about getting it labelled in food and cosmetic products so that consumers can make informed decisions. And really that has become my absolute rock of foundation with where all of this sort of filmmaking passion began. But then, as I've already explored, I started having my own personal journey with mental health and chronic pain in particular, which is still frustratingly undiagnosed and seems to be quite psychosomatic with regards to the sort of childhood trauma. And so, as well as filming the wildlife and talking about environmental issues, I started to talk about how nature was helping me cope as a person and was my rock and my foundation, and thus was the birth of Wild and everything that I'm doing there. And, this is where I think it's, I know we'll talk about it a little bit later, but just so important with what we're doing here. Very much outside of my comfort zone, I don't know what all of the terms are that everybody's talking about and what I know what we're discussing here because that would be really bad. But, we're all people. And I think that's what I just want to sort of give you permission for at the moment, is to take off your professional hats and just remind yourself of who you are and that we're all a part of nature. And I feel a little bit disheartened that there's only a few pineapples to fondle. That's sort of our connection with nature here, when that's really what we're talking about. Yes, sort of reducing our carbon emissions and giving customers a fantastic experience. But, I think it's so important to offer fresh air and grounding and connection in everything that we're doing, because we're all one being, and we all have that shared passion and that shared resilience, and we can't do this as individuals. We have to do this together, and everybody's left here, I commend you all, because you've listened to it, you've sat through the immense heat, and yeah, I really think this is the time for change. I just have to say I had a bit of a laugh to myself when one of the speakers was like, oh, you walk into a room and it's -10. I was like, perfect. So that's just a little bit about my story. So, now with what I do, as I say, I go out and shoot these films. I try and keep them as free as possible and available for people to watch on YouTube. I work with different brands and sponsors, but everything's about long-term partnership. It's about sharing that mission and that story. It's about individual empowerment, and it's about people power as well. It's bottom up, and sort of, to steal that phrase, being the change that we want to see in the world.
Great. Thank you very much, Abby. Thank you. Pyle, I'll come to you next. So in terms of obviously being a part of the Beyond Bamboo team, what drives you?
So my story with Beyond Bamboo, I guess, started off straight after I finished my A-levels. I had a small interest in the environment, but mostly, I'm not going to lie, I was what the kids say broke. So I wanted money. And I started working, and I just found that learning about the environment and being part of a company that is so genuinely interested in bettering the hospitality industry and just wanting to be better, make the world better, and actually give back to the earth, that was what gave me drive and that gave me eagerness to just stay. But yeah, I work now as I said, procurement sourcing lead, and it's been a nice 2 years. It's been really, really good. I've learned so much. I've learned from all my colleagues. It's actually a women-led company, so all women, and yeah, it's great.
Great, thank you, Pal. And I didn't pay her for that either. Ishan, over to you. So what drives you? And tell us a bit more about your project as well.
Yeah, thank you. Just by show of hands, how many people here know exactly what modern slavery is? That's a good number. I'm relieved to see that most of you know. I learnt about the transatlantic slave trade when I was back in school, and we were taught that it was abolished, slavery was abolished in 1833 here in the UK, wiped off the face of the earth, eradicated. What we weren't taught is that after formal abolition in the UK, exploitative practices continue to exist, and those are the very exploitative practices that we see today embedded in our global socioeconomic and political fabrics. They have been there over centuries. It's what our economy thrives on. It's what our economy runs on. I was 13, so it was back in 2016 when I found out that modern slavery existed. I'd been to India growing up as a child. I'd met children who had survived exploitation or who were vulnerable to modern slavery. Had no idea what that meant. So when I was 13, I was finding out that all of this still existed. I was shocked. And I asked all 156 children in my year group at school, do you know modern slavery existed? None of them knew. And this is not an issue happening in faraway communities and faraway countries. It's existing right on our doorstep, in the clothes we wear, in the foods we eat, and in the devices that are in your pocket today. Modern slavery is an issue that is existing at unprecedented rates. The latest estimates put it at over 50 million people in modern slavery globally. And I was really noticing that there was a disconnect between young people and the mainstream anti-slavery movement. The climate movement was bringing young people, the gender movement was bringing young people, but the anti-slavery movement seemed reserved for the academics, for the experts, for the people who collect the data. There wasn't much interaction with young people at all. And so that's where the idea for creating Stolen Dreams really started as an awareness-raising organization, as an online sort of communications hub for young people to really engage with what modern slavery was. And for the first couple of years, so until about sort of 2018, 2019, we really started as an organization that was there to get out the word, to go into schools, to teach young people, to teach children age 7 and above what is modern slavery, how does it manifest, but more importantly, how can you take action? But then we started to realize that actually young people play a greater role than just raising awareness. You know, we can actually take action through intergenerational sort of models. We can push stakeholders and stakeholders who have power to take action too. And that's what we shifted our focus as well, you know, continuing on awareness, but looking at how can we as young people push those in power to take action. And that's why we started interacting with different private sector leaders. We started interacting with our local government, national government, and now we would work with the United Nations on getting young people into decision-making spaces. And more broadly, our work in terms of youth leadership and sort of youth co-leadership, in fact, is the word I like to use, is more so looking at how can young people really be seen not only as beneficiaries, but as valued and equal partners at the decision-making table. And that means giving young people power in terms of convening power, agenda-setting power, and decision-making power too. And we've really been pushing forward that narrative. And for me, this journey has been absolutely incredible to be working in the sector. Yes, it has its challenges. We've had a lot of pushback. Being a 19-year-old in the anti-slavery space isn't fun sometimes. One of the analogies I like to use is like having your foot wedged between a door that's being repeatedly slammed shut. Because it is challenging. It is tough to be a young person in this space. But that's why we really value being invited into spaces like this, having these dialogues, these intergenerational dialogues, because as young people, we acknowledge that we don't have as much experience as those in the positions that you are in, but we are willing to learn, we are willing to help. We're coming here with fresh ideas and perspectives, and we really hope that beyond just you all sitting here and listening to us today, you go and commit to taking action, but you move beyond that, beyond compliance, and actually look at taking action in the spaces and with the power that you occupy and possess.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Ishan. I'll come to you next, actually, Pyle. So what do you think the hospitality industry can do to inspire future guests to choose them?
So I think actually what a lot of that I agree with is what Soraya was saying before. And it's that being honest and being realistic about what your plans are as being part of the hospitality sector is just, you can't just say, you plan to be net zero waste at year whatever and just hope for the best. You have to have a sustainability strategy and actually know what you're going to do, and as a hotel understand what that entails and what that actually means. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Pyle. Abby, I know you touched on a couple of things there in terms of getting in with nature, but what do you think the hospitality industry can do in terms of moving a bit more towards being net positive?
Well, I'm certainly not one to talk about the evolution of technology, even though I seem to have found myself holding a camera quite often. But, I think I've thought about this since knowing I've been coming to this conference, and it's a tricky one. I feel like there's different avenues to look at. I think it's the staffing, and like I've already started with, I think it's about getting to the roots of nature. So how can we actually make this a tactile experience? Is it a case of actually getting your people out into the environment to really understand what you're trying to do here? Like to see the change around you? And is it a case of going to a landfill? I remember as a kid going to a landfill site and being absolutely dismayed. Like, this is horrendous. The plastic that I had as a kid, and those little string cheeses, are still out there somewhere in the ground. And it makes me feel sick, and I think, so there's all the subjects like waste, and I think it's a case of like what's coming in and what's coming out. And we talked about it earlier during our little briefing, like there has to be a ceiling to the modern world. Like, we can't grow and grow and grow. It's like with the plastic, we talked about plastic bags, create cotton bags or jute bags, but it's like, well, actually, if you're going to reuse that plastic bag over and over and over again for 10, 20 years, that's going to be more environmentally sustainable than the jute bags. So it's not a case of, oh, this is bad, make something else. I think it's like, if we've already got something in the system, how can we reuse that and recycle that to continue that process? Like, the plastic and the oils that we've already made are still there. If we can just have the technology and the wisdom and the wants to think outside of the box, then we can use what we've got. Like, there is enough to go around. And I think also, being that outdoorsy person here, I think it is, dare I say it, thinking outside of the money box. If you're out with your family and you find a bird that's just been hit by the windscreen of a passing car, and you've got a bus to train to catch, but your kids really want you to pick up that bird, like, you're probably going to stop and pick up that bird and check it's okay and give it some help, knowing that you can get another bus. But you're making that sacrifice. And I think it's like, actually, where can we as an industry make some sacrifices? Because we can't keep moving forwards. We're not on the same train track. We have to jump onto another one. We've got to think outside of the boxes that we've grown up working in and living in, because this isn't the future. We're in the present. The future is different to now, so it has to look different. We have to think different. We have to challenge ourselves. We have to talk with people that contradict us and explore that. And it's going to be tough, it's going to be uncomfortable, and that's why I really recommend backpacking, because it's usually really tough and uncomfortable, and it makes you persevere. It makes you a more resilient person. Being out in nature makes you a resilient person. So, if you're scratching your head off the back of this conference, that's the main takeaway. I want to just urge you all as individual people is just find some nature, connect to it, put your hands on some moss. Like, I know it sounds really just whatever you want to call it, but it's real, and that's where we belong, and that's what's inspired everything we see around us today. So get out in nature and encourage the people coming through your doors to do exactly the same. If you can give them the chance to take a deep breath, shed the weight that's on their shoulders, then you're saving lives, and that counts for so much.
That's great. Thank you, Abby. I'm going to go find some moss now. Ishan, same sort of question to you. What could you advise, what tips could you give for the hospitality industry in terms of being more ethical in terms of modern slavery and that social aspect?
Yeah, well, the hard truth is that the companies you work for do profit off modern slavery. And that's just a fact. And it's a hard truth, and it's an uncomfortable truth. But I encourage you to sit in that discomfort. to really feel it, because that means that it will sort of push you to take action, or push you to learn, to grow, to unlearn even, and to change your business practices and models. Under the Modern Slavery Act of 2015, companies earning over £36 million are supposed to produce modern slavery statement. The Walk Free Foundation, along with WikiRate, produced a report a couple of years ago on compliance and sort of action against modern slavery in the hotel industry. And sort of at the end of it, there's an annex of all of the modern slavery statements produced by hotels. To be quite frank, most of them are quite pathetic. The legislation itself is very toothless. It's essentially a document that companies, and it might be some of your companies, produce to say, we acknowledge that there's modern slavery in our supply chain, and that's about it. You're not required to take any action. There's no accountability. There's no enforcement. So really, the legislation is not there, and this is something that we're pushing for. As youth, we're pushing for this in the sector, but generally the whole mainstream sector is really pushing for mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence laws. We're not here to make your life harder. We are here to, really humanize the issue, right? Modern slavery is a term that's thrown around completely. It's a very politicized term, but at the end of the day, it's people's hands who are involved in sort of making the products that we consume and use, and that your sector is profiting off of. But essentially, modern slavery the hospitality sector is at high risk on modern slavery, from the construction of your hotels and of your services, to the employers who are working, to the refurbishments, and contracted laborers and migrant laborers are more vulnerable and at risk. It's essentially something that's hidden in plain sight. These chairs, do we know where they're sourced from? The soaps that are in the bathrooms here, the cotton that's used to make the bed sheet, where are all these sourced from? And I think one of the things I implore you all to ask in your personal and professional lives is that, when you see something, ask yourself, who made this? How much were they paid per piece of product produced? And if a brand or if a company can't tell you the answers to these very simple questions, take your spending power elsewhere, or ask them, challenge them, because often a lot of these suppliers and sources wouldn't have even thought about asking these very simple questions. And it's really about starting to challenge your own business practices, because the legislation is not there. There's no one to legally tell you to act and to do these things, but actually it's a conscious decision that you have to make and that we implore you to make urgently too. But this also involves, looking at and I acknowledge that supply chains are very complex, and it's very hard to map out a supply chain and to spot slavery in your supply chain. And often the case is that, companies will look at their first and second tiers, third tiers, and say, we don't have slavery. And the response that I would give is, you're not looking hard enough. There is definitely slavery in your supply chains. But it really means, mapping out those tiers, looking at them, doing site visits, talking to workers on the ground, talking to trade unions. But I think for us as youth, more importantly, because we do recognize that this is an issue that's deeply rooted in our socioeconomic and political fabrics over centuries. It's not going to be sort of undone by 2030, which is when the Sustainable Development Goals tell us to eradicate modern slavery by. That's not realistic. But what we're asking you is to be transparent. Show us that you're mapping your supply chain. Show us the tiers. Show us your suppliers. Take action. And then also, don't be afraid to be held accountable. One of the best examples I give is of the chocolate company Tony's Chocolate Only, which I'm sure some of you have heard about. But essentially, there was a case, I think it was last year, where they had child labor in their supply chains. And there was massive outrage because they were called out for claiming to be slave-free when they weren't actually slave-free. But if you look at Tony's business model, it's actually saying that we acknowledge that there might be slavery in our supply chains. But if there is, when we identify it, we'll be transparent about it. We will tell the public, we have found slavery here, and this is how we're responding to it. And that's what we want. We want to see transparency from the sector, combined with action and combined with accountability. And that's what I implore you to take forward today.
Thank you very much, Ishan. And actually, you've raised a really important point there, because I think, I say your generation, but generations to come as well, you'll walk the walk, and you will buy with your feet. You will move your business elsewhere, and you choose where you buy things from and what you buy. And I think that's really, really important, for all of us to remember as well. Just one final question, actually, and I'll put it out to all three of you, is, and because of course, it's also about the Global Youth Awards, is why are they so important? What is it about it that really kind of, helped you, I guess, as well?
Shall I just start? Do you know, I think as somebody who received this, I just think it's a really empowering thing. in our own individual ways, we're pioneering something. Like, you've not got somebody to steer you into the future because you're going against the trend, and that can be really difficult. So to have, as a young person, some recognition for what you're doing and the discomfort that you go through. So sometimes you feel really ostracized because, like, your peers just don't understand what you're doing. It's tough. So, for me, that's why I really recommend awards such as this, and, talking to young people in your lives and spheres about things that they're passionate about and encouraging them, because as soon as the ball's rolling, it keeps rolling. And this really helped with that.
Did you want?
Yeah, I think, and I think I speak on behalf of all of us, it's not really about the acknowledgement, because we, all of us here and all of the Global Youth Winners have committed to a lifetime of this work because we care. But I think two of the main benefits of being part of this sort of community is the community itself, right? And that's another thing with ESG, is that they're not in silo, they're interconnected, and actually being part of a network where you have young people doing incredible things from the local level to the international level, learning from them, working with them, collaborating is so empowering in itself. But it also means that, it drives progress more efficiently, I think. We can learn from each other. We have that network, we have that support, which is really, really great to have. But also in terms of support and access, it really helps too, in terms of even the simple things like mentorship, how to write a funding proposal, for example, things that we as young people struggle with every day, and that we don't get help with, and that we actively have to seek help for. Having that guidance is really supportive. But again, access to spaces like this where we can interact with decision makers, with people in power, and really get our foot through the door before we kick it wide open, and I apologize in advance. But it's really great to be part of the Global Youth Award community. And yeah, I encourage as many people here to look into it and support it, please, as well, because we need more young people in this space. As you mentioned, we are the future, but we're also the present. We're not waiting, a month or two for now. We want to get involved today, and we want to help and support your efforts today too.
Great, yeah, thank you. And, I just want to bring that point up there as well. These are on-the-ground projects. So I am going to do a little plug and plea here as well, because obviously we run these Global Youth Awards, which is run by young people for young people. Me and the team that help in that, we just do all the bits in the background, all the admin stuff. But actually, it is really all about them. And so wherever anybody can sponsor either donations or gift in kind, whether it's venue or anything like that, but also we want to support the projects that they do. We want to be able to support them to grow the projects that they're doing, because this is ultimately helping us to really rejuvenate and go beyond. So I would like to say thank you, Abby, Pyle, and Ishan. That was amazing. Thank you.